Crested? Thank you. Hi, I'm Staff Air Pollution Specialist, Deborah Paselk, and I'm lead over the Moyer Guideline update. Today's workshop is being conducted in person as well as remotely via Zoom. Following today's workshop, we will post the video on our websites for both Farmer and Moyer, and this workshop will also begin the 45-day comment kickoff for both the Moyer program and the Farmer program. Before we go over some housekeeping items, I would like to mention some of the staff sitting at the table with me today. To my right, you'll see Michelle Buffington, the branch chief over both the Moyer program and the Farmer program 2024 guideline updates. Next to Michelle is Derek Winters, manager over the Moyer guideline update and manager over the off-road source category. And then over to my left, at the end of the table, is Air Resource Engineer Wasim Ali, who's monitoring today's Q&A. For this workshop, we will be providing Spanish translation. If you would like to participate using our Spanish translation channel and are using a computer, please select globe icon on the lower right-hand side of the screen and select the Spanish option to hear the presentation in Spanish. If you are using a mobile device like a phone or tablet, please select more option indicated by the 3 dots, select language interpretation, and then select the Spanish option. One moment as we pause for our translators, Christian and Claudia, to set up. Christian. Thank you, Christian. Our translators are now ready, and I will move on to. So the next Zoom, Next, for the Zoom audience, if you have a question during the presentation, please use the question or answer feature. Type your question and a staff member will read your question aloud and call on you to ensure we've answered your question. Next, we'll go over, if you would like to call us during the presentation, please use the raised hand feature or dial #2 on your phone and we will call on you in the order received. When called, please state your name and your affiliation so that we will better address your question. For those in person, please do not hesitate to stretch your legs or use the restroom at these times by exiting the rear of the room and then turn left, and you'll also find the drinking fountains located near the restrooms. Lastly, in case of emergency, please note that the emergency exits to the rear of the room, exiting to the foyer in the event of a fire alarm, and we are required to evacuate this room immediately and go downstairs to the lobby and out the building. When the all clear signal is given, we will return to the coastal hearing room and resume the workshop. And with that, I've finished our housekeeping and we'll begin the presentation portion. For today, the Moyer team is joined by our Farmer colleagues. The Moyer team will begin today's agenda by going over the goals and a recap of this process thus far. And we will then share the proposed changes to the Carl Moyer program guidelines, and we'll also have 2 open question and answer sessions. The Farmer team will then follow us and share their proposed changes to the Farmer program guidelines. and have an open Q&A period also. We'll then conclude with the next steps at the end of this workshop. Now, as we move into the individual incentive program presentations, I'd like to remind everyone to please be respectful to all, take space and make space, listen to understand, and when we're helping to strategize solutions, follow a win-win approach based on equity. Equity recognizes that the advantages and barriers exist, and as a result, we do not all start from the same place and might need different looking assistance when it comes to incentives. So thank you in advance for your cooperation and collaboration. Now let's begin the CARB Moyer portion with a program overview. For those who may not be familiar with the CARB Moyer program, it is the longest running incentive program at CARB, and it has undergone 4 comprehensive guideline updates and multiple more minor chapter-specific updates in the last 25 years. The last comprehensive CARB Moyer program guideline update was legislatively driven in April of 2017. We are taking the opportunity to update, modernize, streamline, and provide alignment with all the other incentive programs that benefit from each other's continued success. Since the last comprehensive update in 2017, new technologies have come to the market. The state has announced new targets, ambitions, and regulations, and CARB's incentive portfolio has grown. For the 2024 guidelines, Moyer staff have been actively gathering information and re-examining the current guidelines to better meet the needs of our implementing air districts and collective stakeholders. We are striving to provide more consistency throughout our source categories by modernizing the guidelines to reflect current regulations, updating program administration requirements to streamline the program, ensure that advances in technology like zero emission are eligible for funding, and in general, increasing transparency and clarity so that the guidelines are more user-friendly. We are also updating the guidelines to complement other incentive programs where feasible. Additionally, each chapter will have a similar look and feel, making them self-contained and easy to navigate. With their table of contents, acronyms, definitions, and reference sections. The Moyer team has hosted 2 public workshops thus far. The first was a virtual session jointly held with the farmer team in December of 2019 of 2023 to introduce the guideline update process to the public. The second was a hybrid in-person and virtual workshop held on May 17th of this year. Staff shared progress on conceptual updates and to the guidelines. But before we go deeper into the proposed changes by the chapter, we wanted to put a spotlight on the environmental justice component of the Moyer program, which is discussed in Chapter 3, the Program Administration chapter. Per the Health and Safety Code, air districts with a population of 1 million or more residents are required to expend 50% or more of their Moyer program funds to reduce air pollution in communities with the most significant exposure to air pollution, and must meet this requirement by the liquidation deadline for each Moyer fiscal year. Additionally, with the proposed Moyer guideline update, air districts will be required to explicitly outline in their policies and procedures for project selection, including ranking criteria for projects in communities of minority populations or low-income status. When it's applicable to the air districts and source category, this update will allow Moyer program staff to be better informed of how air districts determine their policies and procedures for the project selection and ranking criteria, especially if they prioritize first-time applicants or projects that benefit communities of minority populations or low-income status. The proposed guidelines also acknowledge that there may be cases for waiving the 15% cost share for small businesses and projects located in communities with the most significant exposure to air pollution. Now we'll highlight some of the more significant proposed changes to administration, on-road heavy-duty, and on-road heavy-duty voucher incentive program, commonly referred to as VIP, and light-duty on-road. So we'll begin by discussing the proposed changes in Chapter 2, General Criteria. First, we're expanding project eligibility by removing the selection that requires a project to achieve a 15% NOx emission reduction. It's important to note that Chapter 4, which covers on-road heavy-duty vehicles, will still have this 15% reduction for repower projects as mandated by statute. This change in Chapter 2 will simplify and broaden the scope of projects that can qualify for funding, allowing for more solutions to be considered. Next, we're improving the chapter's overall flow, and we've taken the time to organize and rearrange the sections in a way that's more orderly and intentional manner. This should make it easier to navigate the chapter and find the information that you need more efficiently. Lastly, we've worked on clarifying existing language, and we've made adjustments to ensure that the text is as straightforward as possible. Now, moving on to the proposed changes to Chapter 3, Program Administration. We have made several updates promoting zero-emission technology projects. We are now allowing lease-to-own options, which provides more flexibility for participants. Additionally, we have delayed timelines for baseline scrappage. We've also expanded the eligible cost to include extended warranties, taxes, and insurance, which will help cover more of the expenses associated with the projects. Air districts now have an allowance to extend their grantee contract liquidation timeframe beyond 4 years, providing more flexibility in project completion. Additionally, we are recognizing the increasing responsibilities of the air districts by increasing the total administration fund allocation for them. We are proposing an increase in the air district's total administration fund allocation for air districts from what we have now, which is 6.25% for populations of 1 million or over, to 12.5%. And for the populations with less than 1 million that currently get 12.5% will increase to 15%. We are also streamlining air districts' ability to turn excess admin funds to project funds. We've also made important changes to process since the last comprehensive guideline update. We've added a section on the 1099 form to address tax implications. There are updates to the grant fund allocation timelines to ensure funds are distributed more efficiently. We now allow for electronic record keeping, e-signatures, and virtual inspections, which will help streamline the administrative processes and reduce the need for physical paperwork. Plus, we've implemented additional checks and balances to further strengthen program implementation. For example, there will be additional air district policies and procedure manual requirements, and at the CARB level, the addition of desk reviews and the use of a third-party contractor for program review. Lastly, we're clarifying guidance on several fronts. We've defined direct and indirect administration costs more clearly, ensuring there is no ambiguity, and we've also provided more direction for handling non-performing air district programs and projects. Additionally, we'll be providing a table that outlines the current co-funding allowances and opportunities that can be updated as co-funding opportunities come up, which will be facilitated through a creation of a dedicated website. Before we move on to on-road vehicle chapters, I want to take a pause for a few minutes to ask if in the audience we have any questions that they would like to ask now before the scheduled Q&A portion. So Wasim, is there anybody that's looking to? has a question.
There's no question.
Just a reminder, if you do have a question, just type the question in the Q&A, or you can raise your hand using the hand icon or #2.
There's no question typed, but Daniel Langmaid did have his hand up. So Daniel, let me.
Daniel, what was your question?
Yeah, you should be able to unmute yourself now to ask your question.
Thank you. I actually didn't have a question. I hit that button on accident, but I will just say these are all great changes. So thank you for working with all of us on it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Thanks for testing out the hand icon.
And David Ito also has his hand up. David, you should be able to unmute yourself. And David lowered his hand, so I guess we do not have any questions right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So now we'll proceed and we'll bring up the Q&A again when we come to our scheduled Q&A part of the presentation. So the proposed Chapter 4 updates will build on the Incentive Program Advisory Group efforts in 2021, where CARB explored and welcomed ideas for key issues like zero emission funding and small business support with stakeholders. First, we have ensured that the guidelines align with the state regulations, rules, standards, and emission inventory. And some of these include the new CARB zero emission regulations, but are not limited to that. We have the zero emission powertrain certification regulation and also the advanced clean fleets regulation among some of these regulations. Additionally, optionally, low NOx certification standards have been updated in accordance with the heavy duty omnibus regulation to reflect the changes in NOx and PM emission standards. We've also updated the eligibility and funding criteria to encourage program participation. We're proposing to expand fleets of 10 or fewer to fleets with 20 or fewer vehicles with a maximum of 80% vehicle cost funding amount, which will align with the advanced clean fleets regulation, vehicle scope, and to ease small fleet co-funding and other incentive programs. Also, the transit bus without federal transit administration funding may now be eligible for up to 80% of the vehicle cost for zero emission conversions or replacements. In addition of exceptionally high expenses with the zero emission vehicle ownership and stakeholder feedback, we have added transport fees as an eligible cost. We have added guidance clarification and increased flexibility to support fleets and streamline the overall process. For example, grant amounts that have been based on a minimum of 2 12-month periods in the prior 30 months will now be based on an average of the same time period for baseline vehicles. And we've also defined allowable replacement scenarios for intended service class and weight class differences to ensure a smooth transition to cleaner technologies. And lastly, we'd like to point out the DMV documentation procedures to confirm non-salvageable baseline destruction have also been clarified to reflect new DMV protocols. Now I want to go over the proposed changes on the on-road heavy-duty vehicle voucher incentive program, again, also referred to as VIP. And similar to the on-road chapter, we've added more support for zero emission technology by expanding the eligible costs, and there will be better facilitating of co-funding with the hybrid and zero emission truck and bus voucher incentive project, also referred to as HVIP. And we're encouraging greater participation. We are aligning the Moyer program with state regulations, rules, and incentive program criteria. Notably, We've expanded the fleet size consideration eligibility from 10 vehicles over 14,000 pounds to include 20 vehicles over 8,500 pounds. We've also clarified that the fleet should apply to the VIP program first before considering co-funding with other sources. This ensures that they maximize their available funding options available, and additionally will provide more detailed reporting guidance for drayage truck replacements and clarified the remote inspection protocol in accordance with Chapter 3 guidance. For guidance clarification and changes in the process, we've introduced a new DMV documentation procedure, and we've added requirements for AB 794 attestation and the clean truck check vehicle inspection system compliance documentations at the application stage. This will help ensure that all necessary paperwork is in order right from the start. Now looking at the proposed changes to Chapter 8, light duty vehicles. We are increasing the maximum grant amount from 1,500 to 3,000 due to previously low maximum grant amounts of the Voluntary Accelerated Vehicle Retirement, referred to as VAVR project. Subcommittees proposed an increase to attract more applicants and boost participation. It should also be noted that the cost effectiveness limit has increased to 60,000. Next, we've also provided updated retired vehicle emission reduction tables for the period from 2024 to 2026. And these current tables were outdated, so this update ensures that we have the most accurate and relevant data to work with going forward. We are now going to open it up to our first question and answer portion for the Moyer program. So if you are going to ask a question via the Q&A chat, please type your question in. Otherwise, you can also use the hand raise function, or if you're calling by phone, #2. And when you do so for the calling feature, please state your name and your affiliation before asking a question and making a comment. So we will now open it up. Wasim, do we have any questions?
Thank you, Debbie. Yes. We had a couple of questions answered by Talina. I just want to quickly read those off. The first question was, are there other opportunities for other change proposals? And Talina didn't comment that the 45-day comment period ends on October 14th. So we are accepting comments until that time. Second question that was answered already, you stated only more significant updates will be discussed. Is there a strikeout version available that shows all changes? Currently, right now, there's no strikeout underlined version that is available. We have the 2017 Moyer guidelines posted, if someone wants to refer to those. Two open questions that are in. First one is by Janine. I'll read that question off. On page 447, table 413, required inspections for on-road projects. The post-inspection timing indicates that it must occur before delivery of the new truck. However, for contracted projects under Chapter 4, there is a requirement that the truck is paid in full. So what is the purpose of holding the truck at the dealership for inspection? We have large fleets that purchase from dealership outside of our air district, and getting an inspection to the dealership can be very challenging. Once the applicant has paid in full, the truck is now theirs and the dealership is no longer owns it. The post-inspection should only be required prior to payment so that in the event that wrong truck was purchased, payment is not made. So it looks like there's a couple of questions in that comment. So
good afternoon, everybody. My name is Yadira Stornio, lead staff over the on-road category for the Incentives and Technology Advancement Branch, otherwise known as the Moyer program. To Janine's question regarding the purpose of doing the post-inspection or holding the truck at the dealership for inspection, well, Yeah, I think the last portion of your comment is accurate. According to table 14 in the proposed guideline updates, does state that the, posted inspection must occur before the replacement vehicle is delivered and prior to payment being issued. So that requirement is in place is to ensure that the actual replacement vehicle is actually certified to the, quoted, what's quoted in the invoice, as far as, to ensure that whatever is being delivered to the end user is actually what they pay for and what the air district had agreed to with the dealership. Because we have seen some instances of delivered vehicles not necessarily matching, not matching the expectations of the end users. So it sounds like we're sort of like in agreement as far as the post-inspection occurring prior to the payment and prior to the delivery of the vehicle. So.
Thank you, Yadir. The next question that we have in our chat is from Michael Lewis. What was the rationale for the 20 vehicles? The new rule for HDV is 50 vehicles or more. What happens to those who have more than 20 but fewer than 50?
Thank you for your question, Michael. So it sounds like you're referring to the new advanced clean fleets regulation that's in effect. That's applicable to the fleets that are generally 50 or larger, or have that gross revenue of $50 million. But basically, to answer your question, fleets of all sizes are eligible for funding under Chapter 4 on-road heavy-duty vehicles in the Moyer program. So it would just basically depend on the applicable regulation for the fleets, and the project would need to demonstrate surplus emission reductions to what is required by regulation, or cleaner, or that goes above and beyond than what is required by regulation. So to answer your question on the rationale for expanding the vehicle size to 20 vehicles for at least on-road VIP, we want to coax more participation in the program, especially for small fleets. We want these zero emission trucks to be deployed for the drayage and pretty much like the small fleets throughout the state. And because of, we haven't necessarily seen the kind of interest that we would like from small fleets to take up zero emission trucks, we've kind of expanded like the fleet size eligibility consideration under VIP to expand from 10 vehicles of 14,001 pounds or greater to 20 vehicles for those vehicles that are greater than 8,500 pounds. Just to cast a wider net on eligibility, and also to, as my colleague Debbie mentioned a little while ago, we want to align our eligibility considerations with other state incentive funding programs, such as the HVIP, which also defines small fleets in a similar fashion regarding those 20 or fewer vehicles. So that's pretty much the rationale for expanding the vehicle fleet size to 20 vehicles. And Chapter 4 kind of mirrored that same change as well for Chapter 4 considerations. And the total vehicle, the percentage of the total vehicle cost was also extended in consideration of that fleet size expansion as well. So it's no longer the vehicles that are less than 10 vehicles that are eligible for that 80% total vehicle cost. It can go up to like those 20 vehicles. So to answer your second question, for those that have more than 20 but fewer than 50, they can apply for funding at their local air district for their baseline vehicles. As long as they work with their air district, then they can demonstrate surplus emission reductions to the applicable regulation that their fleet is subject to.
Thank you, Yadir.
Hopefully that answers your question.
We don't have any Q&As typed, and we do have 3 folks that have their hands up. So Emily, I will allow you to talk. Please unmute yourself and comment or ask your question.
Hi, thanks so much. My name is Emily Stevens with TRC, and I have a question about leasing. So I read the new lease to own guidance, but this is kind of a different situation. So are program participants allowed to have a grant funded vehicle and then lease that out to a different end user during the operational period, and that's assuming that the participant ensures all operational reporting and program requirements are met.
You're asking about them leasing the vehicle to another person besides the person that is under the application?
Correct. So the applicant would have a grant funded unit. Are they then allowed to lease that unit out to a different end user, but still make sure that all the requirements of the program are met?
So that is not exactly what we're looking at, is we're providing this lease to own to those who are the actual applicants that are applying for the funding themselves, and that they would be the end user of that vehicle or that piece of equipment.
Got it. Can I ask why that's not allowed? Is it because you're trying to, yeah, can I just ask why that's not allowed?
We're not allowing that because the point of the program is for the users themselves, the grantees. This is not to assist those who are to lease to own to another individual. The applicant or the grantee is the one who's responsible and the one who's will be responsible for the contract itself. So that responsibility lies on them, and we need to ensure that they are complying with their contract. If they are not complying with their contract, we can't ensure that the program is being run as it's meant to be implemented.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. The next person that we had is Lisa. Lisa, let me give you the, now you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, I'm Lisa with Tons Truck Center. So I had a can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, it's Lisa from Tons Truck Center. I had a couple questions to get clarity on chapter 4, and you talked about the 20 vehicle fleet size, and I'm assuming that when we go over the 20, it's still the 50%, and then do you have the increases on the DAC with 90, 95, and 100 on the smaller fleet sizes? And then just for also clarity, because it's not clear to me, I'm assuming that VIP would include that warranty, tax, and insurance. And then there's one more. The table for the class 2B and 3 going to be the 170K base amount?
So I can attempt to answer that question. It sounds like there are 3 parts to that question. So to answer your question regarding warranty, insurance, and taxes being eligible for funding under both Chapter 4 and VIP, the answer is yes.
Okay.
For zero emission technologies, that is. The first part of your question was in regards to priority population plus ups. So you are correct, for those fleets that are greater than 20 vehicles, they would be eligible for that 50% of the total vehicle cost under Chapter 4. But regarding those priority population plus ups, that is a feature unique to the voucher incentive program, and that's only for, and that's yeah. So if I can clarify a little bit there, yeah. So those plus ups are reserved for those for those projects that are located within priority populations, whether they're domiciled there or primarily operated there. But yeah, that's a feature unique to the voucher incentive program. And for those particular projects, like depending on the fleet size, I think I'd have to double check, but I think the ones that are from 1 to 10 are they're eligible for up to like 95%, and then certain subset are eligible for up to 95%, and then the other are eligible for up to 90%, depending on how small the fleet size is. So those perks are not applicable under Chapter 4. And we have heard interest from certain air district stakeholders regarding, that possibility. And that's something that we can explore in the future as far as incorporating into Chapter 4. But as of right now, Chapter 4 is, the total vehicle cost is restricted to 80% or 50%, depending on that fleet size. And there are no priority population plus ups for Chapter 4 at this time.
Okay, so that's helpful. I would like to get clarity on those increments associated with the fleet size on those different percentages if I could, because it's different, I think, currently right now, so I want to make sure I got the right number. And then is the base rebate for the class 2B3 going to be the same as the medium duty on the 170K?
Class 2B, 3B. I'm not sure I'm following, but essentially medium duty vehicles are eligible for funding on a case-by-case basis in Chapter 4. When we're talking about fleet size consideration for both Chapter 4 and VIP, when we're counting vehicle size that are above 8,501 pounds, that's only for the purposes of counting the fleet size. For those class 2B, those medium duty vehicles that you're alluding to, they're only eligible for replacements on a case-by-case basis on Chapter 4. But like I said, the reason why we're including those vehicles in the vehicle count, though, is just to facilitate co-funding opportunities and to align with the Advanced Clean Fleets regulation, to align with the vehicle scope of the Advanced Clean Fleets regulation. So that kind of, hopefully that provides a little bit clarity on those class 2B and 3 vehicles as far as like how they're funded.
Oh, okay. So that's okay. I wasn't clear to me. Okay. So then just a follow-up to that. So then the class 2B and 3 is going to be funded on a case-by-case basis in Chapter 4. And is class 2B and 3 funded at all in VIP?
No, yeah, right. That's correct. Your understanding is correct. As far as VIP is concerned, the replacement vouchers are limited to 10 vouchers for heavy duty replacements. So the vouchers are still limited to heavy duty truck replacements that are 14,001 pounds or greater, because we do want to retain the spirit of the program and make sure that the traditional small fleets that are less than 10 are on an equal playing field as these larger fleets that are now eligible for participation.
Okay, all right. Okay. A little confusing, but I understand it. Okay, thank you.
We have 2 more folks that have their hands raised. So the first one I'm allowed to talk is Kevin Hamilton. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, hi, Kevin Hamilton from CCAC. Just wanted to say, first of all, strong work here for staff. Really appreciate some of the changes you made in regard to earlier comments on this particular program. The allowance of lease to own is just potentially transformational for a lot of our smaller driver groups, especially those who only have 1, 2, 3 trucks. I think this is going to be a huge win for them, along with the delayed scrappage. Need to learn a little more about delayed scrappage, but I'll take the time to do that on my own. I won't task you with that here today. The expansion of eligible costs to include extended warranties is critical. We've talked to some folks around here, again, have small fleets, 10 and less, and the warranty issue is significant to them. Not a deal killer, but problematic. And extending to that is really going to be a win to them. And taxes and insurance is just the gravy on top of that. The contract liquidation timeframe beyond 4 years that's pretty remarkable. I was surprised by that. And again, is there a reason for that? I just wondered. And then again, the last thing and probably the most critical thing from our world is how do you better direct or provide guidance to air districts on how to get this information out to these very groups with 20 and less trucks who need it so desperately? Because in the surveys that we've done through the work we've done on the WAD-EV project down in Kern and up here in Fresno with some CalSTART meetings, these drivers aren't hearing anything about this. So, and we're trying to figure out better vehicles, no pun intended, for them to get this information. But it has to be better than, an occasional weekend show or a meeting where they, pop through once a month in one area. And every driver apparently is not working that day who owns a truck and needs to be there if they want to get this information or even know it exists. So we encourage you to build in some kind of outreach, a mandate to the districts and carve out for them to pay for that. that is a little more effective and local. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin, for your comment. Matt Lyon, I know you had your hand up as well. Did you want to let me allow you to unmute yourself to ask your question and comment?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. And I put this question in the Q&A too, just in case. But following back up on the lease questions, it seems that the way the program is written, it excludes fleet operators that lease vehicles. And I think as Kevin and others mentioned, the lease to own path seems to be geared towards smaller fleets, which I think is really helpful for those fleets, as Kevin, as the previous commenter mentioned. For larger fleets who lease vehicles as their norm, which can have a potentially very large emissions reduction opportunity with CARB Moyer, it seems that they're excluded. Is that the intent?
Well, any project is eligible under the Moyer program as long as the applicant owns the baseline equipment and they're willing to scrap it. So I think the second part of your question, when it's asking about is there a path for eligibility for those fleets that currently lease ICE vehicles for applying to own ZEVs, if they do not own the baseline vehicle, then I'm not sure how they can really. I'm not sure if they can actually destroy the baseline vehicle if they're leasing it from another entity. So unless they own the vehicle and they're willing to scrap it for the replacement, then I don't see how there's an eligibility pathway for them.
Yeah, and so that's really the crux of my question, is that I think there's an exclusion of quite a large group of fleets that would have an opportunity to reduce their emissions through this program that this isn't being considered for. And so curious also, there seems to be an opportunity here to find that pathway for that model. And so additionally, is there a path for eligibility for those fleets that currently lease ICE vehicles but would potentially be planning to own ZEVs so that they could be eligible? So if there's an ownership for a future ZEV, but they don't own any current vehicles, they lease through a larger leasing company, is there a path forward for participation there?
So the Moyer program is authorized to fund surplus emission reductions. So for those vehicles that are being leased, if the applicant does not own it and they're leasing it from a larger entity, then the baseline vehicle would need to be scrapped. So if unless they have a lease to own agreement in place, and eventually the applicant owns the vehicle clean, then at that point there's nothing to stop them to apply for a zero emission vehicle replacement. But essentially, the Moyer program the reason why it's CIP creditable as far as its surplus emission reductions goes associated with their project is because there's a scrappage requirement element for baseline vehicles. So that may be a little bit difficult for those who lease their vehicles and do not own their vehicles, and would not be able to scrap their vehicle accordingly.
Right. I'll follow up.
I'm
with,
sorry,
I'll follow up with
Matt, I just
comments
wanted to
on
add.
that. Yep.
I just wanted to add one more part to this. So what Nadir is saying about the Moyer program is absolutely true. It is a scrap and replace program. We have had some discussions about it being a fleet expansion, like allowing for fleet expansion, but we are not approaching and going to maybe consider that in the next revision of the guidelines. In the meantime, however, there are other programs within the portfolio that CARB has that are not scrap and replace programs, namely the HFIT program. And so those fleets who are leasing their vehicles and currently do not own them still have other opportunities to receive state funding and support.
Thank you. I think there's some nuance that I can follow up with on comments. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you, Matt. Next hand up is from Ami Desai. I'm going to unmute you. Please go ahead and unmute yourself and should be able to talk. Well, he's working on that. Tyrone didn't put in a couple of questions. in the chat, but then he also has his hand up. So Tyrone Bell, I'm going to allow you to unmute yourself and you should be able to talk.
Hi, Wasim. Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to maybe clarify the leasing questions from Emily and Matt, and sorry to speak for you guys. I'm kind of understanding their question a little bit differently, and I think it's a critical difference. I believe they're asking, let's say hypothetical company, Acme Truck Leasing, Trucking Rental. They own ICE vehicles already. They want to replace their ICE vehicles with electric ones or a cleaner diesel, whatever. They're not leasing it to others for them to own. They're just like leasing it out or renting out those grant funded vehicles. But they will maintain the ultimate ownership and would still be responsible for reporting usage. Are those fleet operators or owners eligible to participate? In short, can a company rent out their grant funded equipment for others to use as long as they maintain ownership and scrap the old equipment and commit to the reporting?
Tyrone, this is Derek Winters, Moyer Off-Road lead manager. I got promoted, sorry.
Congratulations.
Thank you. What it sounds like is that would be, within that, that applicant, it would be within their, their right to essentially, whoever uses their truck is not necessarily something that we kind of detail in our guidelines, but we do detail the ownership. So I think that would be allowable in this case. But going back to the previous question, it did sound like they were trying to transfer the ownership. And then in that situation, they would just make sure that the in-person carried on the contract life of that truck. But yeah, in the case that you actually are speaking on, yeah, that would be okay for the original applicant to retain ownership of the truck. And then essentially whoever drives the truck is not necessarily detailed in our guidelines, if that helps.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. No more open questions, and we still have Ami has his hand up. Ami, are you able to unmute yourself? Or if you're not able to unmute yourself and ask the question, you can type it in the chat. We can ask it toward the end of the presentation. But you should be allowed to unmute yourself and ask your question. So I'll give you another few seconds to see if you can do that. Otherwise, besides Ami, I think we don't have any other hands up or any open questions. So back to you, Debbie.
So for this portion, we will be highlighting some of the proposed changes to the off-road equipment, locomotive, marine, and lawn and garden, along with the infrastructure chapters. And then we'll be following it up with the changes that we made to our appendices. But before we proceed, I just want to remind the audience that all of the source category changes have been updated to promote zero emission technology projects. And so again, just a reminder, as we were discussing during the Q&A, there is a lease to own option for these other source categories also, which will provide more flexibility for our participants. And again, we will also have delayed timeline for the baseline scrappage for these zero emission replacement projects. And we've also expanded the eligible costs to include extended warranties, taxes, and insurance to help cover those expenses associated with these projects. And then additionally, again, air districts now have that allowance to extend their grantee contract liquidation timeframe beyond 4 years, providing more flexibility in project completion. So let's take a look at Chapter 5, which focuses on our off-road projects. One of our most significant changes is that Moyer will now point to the farmer guidelines for Moyer eligible off-road agricultural projects. And the Moyer Chapter 5 will now focus solely on Moyer eligible non-agricultural projects. We are also expanding the opportunities for zero emission projects by removing the need for a case-by-case determination, which was previously required for funding, and significantly speeding up the approval process. We've broadened the funding opportunities to include engines below 25 horsepower, transportation refrigeration units, and the utility terrain vehicles. This expansion is aimed at supporting a wider range of off-road projects, and we've also set a minimum project life of 1 year for increased project flexibility, as requested by many of our air districts to increase the number of projects eligible for funding. Lastly, we've implemented more stringent baseline and replacement requirements. Eligible replacement projects, engines must be Tier 4 or cleaner, and we're aligning with our goals to reduce emissions more effectively. And additionally, family emission limit engines that are dirtier than the standard are no longer eligible for funding. And this ensures that we only have the cleanest technologies are supported. Now we're going to be focusing on locomotive projects, and many of the changes to this chapter are the result of adapting to developing technological changes and not the result of regulation. First, we've added retrofits and conversions as new eligible project types, allowing more innovative approaches to reducing emissions. There's also an allowance for a 2-for-1 equipment replacements, which can be a more efficient way to modernize these fleets. And additionally, we've included lease projects for zero emission replacements, providing more flexibility in how these projects can be structured. In terms of funding, we've raised the funding percentages for select projects, making it more financially feasible to undertake these important initiatives. We've also introduced more flexibility with project lives. The minimum project life is now 1 year, but we also are going to have partial year project lives. So we'll have, for instance, 4.5 years would be acceptable. This change accommodates different project timelines and makes it easier to align with operational needs and changes in the regulation, and also allowing the applicant to receive funding before the regulation kicks in. We've also focused on flexibility and clarification of requirements. So zero emission projects can now proceed with CARB approval, which simplifies the process for implementing these clean technologies. Moreover, we've provided clear guidelines for the requirements for engine destruction and ensuring that all parties understand what's needed for compliance. And now we'll discuss Chapter 7, focusing on marine vessels. So firstly, we are expanding opportunities for zero emission and zero emission capable hybrid projects. We've clarified the applicability of cost effectiveness limits. For zero emission, we've added new eligible costs like dry docking and sea trials to provide more comprehensive financial support and update warranty requirements to ensure long-term reliability and performance for zero emission funded equipment. Next, we've aligned with the amended commercial harbor craft regulation and the at berth regulation. And this means we're expanding funding opportunities to include engines below 25 horsepower. We've also updated load factors, emission factors, citations, and definitions to ensure everything is in line with the latest regulatory standards. We've removed the need for case-by-case determinations. So instead, we are proposing to use the approved ZEET application process for zero emission and zero emission capable hybrid projects. And this is going to streamline the application process and make it easier for projects approved and funded. We've lastly provided guidance for vessel replacement projects to ensure clarity and ease of compliance. Now, before I take move to the next slide, which is lawn and garden. I'm going to open it up once again. And I want to just take a pause in a few minutes and see if there's any questions from the audience online.
No questions are typed, but I do have Graham who has his hand up, so I will unmute him. Graham, you should be able to unmute yourself and talk.
Yes, hi, Graham Balch from Zeromar. We specialize in installing zero emission systems in marine vessels. I just really want to thank Marion for doing a fantastic job. My eyesight's not good enough. Is Marion among that group of people lined up? Yeah, there you are. Great. Hi. So fantastic job updating Chapter 7. I think that Chapter 7 guidelines before this revision were significantly out of line with the commercial hovercraft regulations, and both in terms of terminology as well as protocols. I think this is a really important shift forward that aligns the funding with the regulation. And just wanted to say a big thank you to Marion for making it so clear and concise.
Thank you for your comment, Graham.
Thank you, Graham. The next hand up that we have is from Christian. I will allow you to unmute yourself and you should be able to ask your question now.
Hello, I had two questions, and so I can do them both at once or one at a time. But the presentation had mentioned that all agricultural projects will go to farmer. If there's a difference in eligibility requirements, where would you go to? Because like in one place, the staff report said Moyer funding would be used for Moyer eligible farmer programs. And then another place it says that Moyer projects will be pointed to farmer. So for off-road ag projects, should the farmer criteria be used?
Hey, Christian, this is Vicky, and I'm the lead of the off-road chapter. So thank you for this question, and I'm sorry if it came off kind of confusing, but so we are pointing to our farmer guidelines for off-road equipment. And so for ag equipment, excuse me. And so when those agricultural equipments, they're funded through Moyer, but they're going to be using the farmer guidelines. And so the eligibility that you can familiarize yourself with for those projects would be the ones in the farmer guidelines. We did work together in this change. And so, yeah, we did work together in this change, and so you would want to refer to the farmer guidelines for those projects. Was that clear? Do you have any other questions?
No, yeah, that's correct.
Thank you, Christian.
And then the second question was with the 1 year timeline.
Yes.
Early in Chapter 5, it said that there's a minimum project life of 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
But then later, only 4 of the categories talked about having a minimum of 1 year project life. And so I was confused if all of the categories can use the 1 year or only those 4 that specifically mentioned it. The repower, portable and stationary projects, in-use off-road diesel fuel fleets, cargo handling, and large spark and zero emission forklift sections.
Is it okay for me to say it's consistent throughout our Moyer guidelines that we're all using the 1 year project life, 1 year minimum? Okay, yes, yes, throughout the different chapters.
Okay, and then I can put this in like written comments later, but I don't know if this is a forum where you want to expand on that. Like if a project is going to be required to be compliant in a year, I guess why give the money just for 1 year's worth of emission reductions?
So I know if I can answer just a little bit, I don't know if anybody else will step in, but I know when we were considering the 1 year project life, we wanted to make sure we were giving more equipment eligibility to participate into the program. And so that's why we reduced it to the 1 year. And so I do understand your concern, but it was in the hopes of allowing more equipment to receive Moyer funds to swap out third year equipment. But that is that is hopefully to help applicants. And also when we decided this with the air districts. And so we worked with them to provide this flexibility to Moyer projects. I don't know if anyone else wants to chime in too.
Yeah, just to add on to that, Christian, this is Derek. Yeah, there's increasing regulations, and we're trying to provide an opportunity for those that have compliance deadlines that are sooner than later. Make sure there's some funding allowable for that. For them to get some. So even though it is a smaller window, they are going to receive a smaller grant amount. So it's reflective of the emission reductions that are achieved.
Okay, that smaller grant amount, I guess I didn't come across yet. So I'll look through the guideline more for that it's, I guess, adjusted.
Christian, I think you'll be able to find a lot of that information when you're looking at project life and the calculations for cost effectiveness thresholds and limits, and those might be in the appendices. But really, it's important to note that the project life is a part of the calculation methodology. So if it is 1 year, it will the cost effectiveness would be calculated less. It would be less than if it was a 5-year project, for example.
Thank you, team, for that. There was one additional comment or question that Tyrone Bell typed, so let me read that off real quick. Is there a definition of utility terrain vehicles available? We're seeing local interest for automated side-by-side equipment and vehicles that look more like heavy-duty golf carts. Would these potentially qualify as UTV?
Hi, Ty. It's Vicky once again. It was nice to meet you a few weeks ago. We did not include a definition for utility terrain vehicles, but I think in this specific question, I definitely think you can reach out to us so we can look at it and see if it's something that would be a case-by-case situation. But definitely reach out to us for these types of maybe trickier equipment. But I definitely want to check it out.
Tyrone, just to add a little bit to what Vicky said. Yeah, so right now what we have in mind and in the guidelines for a utility vehicle is essentially a commercial equipment that a company uses that is usually gas powered or diesel powered. But we do actually have, and there's some features that might be seen on that, but we do actually have a definition in our guidelines that specifies that. But if it doesn't fit those exact specifications, please let us know in the comment. But essentially, any type of vehicle that fits that utility vehicle kind of definition that a company uses for their whatever they do, that was something that we're trying to incentivize. So if the definition is a little bit off, please let us know. We're trying to update that. But that's the source category or the target of that we're trying to make with that adjustment to our guidelines.
Thank you, Derek. Debbie, I'm not seeing any open questions or any raised hands, so I'll pass it back to you. Vicky has one comment.
Also, we have the off-road utility terrain vehicle definition in the definition section of the draft chapter.
Am I ready to go now?
We do have one more question that just popped up really quick, Debbie, from Lauren Dunlap. General question: air districts use AirB's tools. Carl, to aid in evaluating applicants. How soon after adoption of finalized 2024 guidelines will Carl be updated with these new emission factors, load factors, partial year project lives, et cetera, for use by air districts?
Hi, this is Derek. Yeah, I'm the manager over the Carl database. So right now we're kind of projecting maybe a 3 to 4 month lag and actually updating Carl with all the updates proposed in the guidelines. I do apologize for that delay, but we cannot start coding that into the system until it's board approved. So we're kind of in a hurry up and wait mode right now. But as soon as these guidelines are proposed, our developers are going to start working and trying to get that to the air district as soon as possible. But definitely reach out to us if there's any type of calculations or anything that you need as soon as possible, because we don't want to slow down implementation of the guidelines due to the CARL system. So please work with us if there's any type of clarification or information that you need that the CARL system would provide.
Thank you, Derek. And then Tyrone did have a comment that he found the definition, said thank you. And I believe that is all the open questions and no hands are raised. So Debbie, back to you.
Thank you, Wasi. Now we will talk, I will go over chapter 9, which focuses on the replacement of lawn and garden equipment. This chapter was recently amended in 2023 and expanded the program to include commercial operators, new equipment types, and increased voucher amounts. In this round for the 2024 updates, we've increased purchasing flexibility for charging equipment. Specifically, we've broadened the scope to include non-permanent charging equipment and charging cables as eligible project costs. And this change will ensure that our participants have necessary infrastructure to support their new equipment without incurring additional out-of-pocket expenses. To simplify the implementation, we've expanded the window for participants to deliver operational lawn and garden equipment to air districts, dismantlers, and other third parties from 30 days to 60 days. This extension provides participants with more time to comply with the requirements and ensures a smoother transition. Now I'll be walking you through some of the important updates in chapter 10, focusing on infrastructure. Many of the changes in this chapter were the result of technological maturation and technology becoming more standard. We've added some new categories to broaden the scope of the projects that can qualify for funding. Additionally, we've removed case-by-case approval for certain project types, such as transport refrigeration units, truck stop electrification, off-grid solutions, microgrids, and mobile refuelers. Infrastructure has new and had limited projects to popular types, which have now broadened as the number of project types have matured. For example, we now have portable power projects are now eligible. This should make it much easier and quicker to get these types of projects off the ground. We've also included additional EV charging protocols to ensure we're staying current and evolving with technology. Next, we're introducing more opportunities for funding across the board. We've raised the funding percentages, making it more feasible to undertake larger projects. We understand that every project has its own unique set of costs, so we're making more costs and fees eligible for funding. Importantly, some of these additional costs and fees are now pre-contract with the air district's approval, giving you more flexibility in your planning stages. And then lastly, we're also enhancing flexibility and streamlining the requirements to make the whole process smoother. For co-funded projects, we've added more flexibilities by no longer requiring CARB verification to proceed. We've also added flexibility to the competitive bidding requirement, meaning the public entities with existing processes can meet the requirement without additional steps. And if there are any issues, the air district can provide a written justification to CARB. And then publicly accessible stations now have flexibility in their 24-hour accessibility requirements, making it easier to meet real-world conditions. We've also streamlined uptime requirements for all of the projects and relaxed pre-inspection requirements for new infrastructure projects. So we're going to go to the next set of slides, which are what are the proposed changes to the guideline appendices. And then we'll open it up for our last portion for the Q&A for the Moyer program. So first, we've updated the definitions and the acronyms in Appendix A and Appendix B. And this ensures that everyone is on the same page regarding the terminology throughout the guidelines. Next, Appendix C has been reformatted for clarity purposes, and we've taken the time to reorganize this section to make it easier to navigate and understand. Appendix D is now solely containing the emission reduction tables with updated factors and metrics to align with inventory and regulations. And then Appendix E has been repurposed to contain cost effectiveness limits, discount rates, capital recovery factors, which were previously in Appendix D. And the references that were previously contained in Appendix E have now been moved to the individual chapters that they pertain to. This change ensures that we can find relevant references directly with the context of the specific topics that you're going to be working on or looking at. And this will improve usability and efficiency. So now I want to go over the proposed changes for cost effectiveness and calculations. First, we're going to be introducing the one-step calculation that will be used for all project types going forward. This new approach is to simplify the process, making it easier and faster to determine the cost effectiveness of various projects. And there's also going to be a significant change in the introduction of new calculation methodology for NOx emissions for on-road engines from 2013 and newer. And this new methodology will improve the precision of our NOx emission estimates, helping us better assess the environmental impacts of these projects. Next, we're updating the cost effectiveness limits, and these updates ensure that our limits remain relevant and reflect the latest economic and environmental considerations. Lastly, we are also updating the tables for emission factors, load factors, and other related metrics to align with our current inventory and regulations. And you can find these updated tables in Appendix D again, just as a reminder. And this alignment ensures that our calculations are based on the most accurate and up-to-date information. And lastly, we are also going to have some new data tables that have been added to this appendix also. And these tables are going to provide more comprehensive data, further supporting accurate and reliable calculations. And with that, I'm going to now open it for our last question and answer period for the Carl Moyer program. So Wasim, do we have any questions online? Again, remember to use the Q&A feature if you wish to type your question, or use the raised hand function or #2 if you're on the phone. And again, please state your name and affiliation before asking your question or making your comment. Wasim?
Thank you, Debbie. I don't see any questions in the room here, so I will go to online questions for now. And we do have one hand up. So first question is from James Dumont. Under section 10, infrastructure table 10.2 notes a 10% plus up for additional incentives for projects located near sensitive receptors. How is near defined? Will the air districts have discretion in defining near, or will CARB establish a maximum distance?
I can go ahead and answer that question. This is Ken Bhatti, and I'm the lead over the infrastructure category. I'm also part of the locomotive category. So we will be following CAP's definition for nearby. So air district staff has the discretion to determine how distance to sensitive receptors can be factored in.
Ken. The next question is from Adam Shapiro. Will CARB be providing updated sample calculations implementation tables? And if so, when will those be made available?
Hi, Adam. This is Josh Simmons. I was in charge of compiling the appendices for the guideline update. And yes, we do plan on providing updated sample calculations, detailing out the new methodology. Those will be made available as soon as possible, but no exact timeline on that yet.
Thank you, Josh. Next question is from Matt Lyon. Can you discuss the publicly accessible station infrastructure changes in more detail?
Yes, Ken Bhatti again. I can go over some of those changes. So one of the main changes is that publicly accessible stations previously had a requirement where they had to be operational 24 hours a day. We heard from air districts and others that that requirement is sometimes difficult to meet, especially for stations that are located behind a gate or some other type of restricted access, such as at a dealership. So we are allowing some flexibility to where those stations now can operate during their regular business hours. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. The next question from Michael Caprio. Is there a potential for a red line version of the revised regulations to be created? Availability of a red line version would greatly assist in review of the revisions.
This is Michelle Buffington. I think we chose to not provide the revised red line version for the guidelines because the changes were very substantial. And so it was making it to be a very difficult read to do a comparison. I think we can go back and talk a little bit more about whether or not we have the ability to provide the red line version. You can also maybe reach out. There's some contact information at the end that we might be able to assist you with your question. Thanks.
Thank you, Michelle. Michael Cardoza also has his hand up, so he typed in a couple questions. So I'll unmute him and ask him to ask his questions. But we did have a last question that we have from Yen Bin Mo. For battery electric equipment, is it possible to stack with core funding? If yes, what's the mechanism for the stacking?
Hi, this is Derek Winters. Yeah, so right now, CORE is one of the entities that you can stack with our co-fund with. We are going to be actually having some detailed information about how to actually co-fund with other entities on our website. That's going to be provided later. But in general, part of the Moyer guidelines is you cannot put the deposits down before execute a contract. So we always recommend starting with Moyer first, but those are details that your air district and us at CARB can provide that information about how to actually do that. And now it's going to be on our website. So that's going to be provided after the guidelines are posted or excuse me, approved by the board.
Thank you, Derek. Well, Michael did lower his hand, but then he did type his questions up. So let me ask, I believe he has 4 questions. So let me go through them one by one. Just for clarification, non-ag projects will use the Moyer guidelines and ag projects will use the farmer guidelines.
Correct. Yes, Michael. The non-ag Moyer projects will continue to use Moyer and the ag ones will go to farmer.
Thank you, Vicki. So his second question, to my understanding that now on ag projects, the extended warranty will be covered under the program.
Correct. Our extended warranties match. They're consistent with each other. So the extended warranty you see referenced in Chapter 5 is also found in the farmer guidelines.
And I will just also point out, Michael, that following this presentation, there will be another presentation from the farmer team. So you'll be hearing a lot more about those projects and the requirements for that program in just a little bit.
Thank you. His next one, the cost-effective limit updates were made to reflect the higher cost of equipment.
Hi, Michael. This is Joshua Simmons. Yes, you'll notice that the conventional or the base cost effectiveness limit has been increased from $34,000 per ton to $60,000 per ton. That was to reflect the higher cost of equipment, as well as an analysis that included Air District reported data through the CARL database where we evaluated how cost effective those projects were over the last, since the last 2017 guideline update. And that informed the current cost effectiveness limits that you'll see reflected in the proposed guideline update.
Thank you, Josh. And Michael's last question, how much longer will the Moyer and Farmers program be available?
This is Michelle. I think we want to be able to answer forever, but I will say that Moyer has a continuous appropriation and it's been reauthorized through January 1st of 2034. So that has kind of ensured that the Moyer program will continue through 2034. The farmer program is a little bit different. It receives an annual appropriation from the legislature. And so there are possibilities that we will receive an allocation. In some years that's been 50 million to up to 150. I think there was a year that we might be went above 150, maybe I think 215, 210. But then there was this year where we currently don't have an allocation. We think that there's some new budget bill language out that may allocate a small amount of funding. So the farmer program does not have the continuous source of funding that Moyer does.
Thank you, Michelle. And the next, we have 3 hands up. So let me call on Stephen. Stephen, you should be allowed to unmute yourself to ask your question. You will give it a few seconds.
I don't think I have a question. Thanks so.
Okay, thank you. Next up, Christian, you also had your hand up. Did you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, thank you. I didn't have the Appendix D just came out, I believe, this morning, so I haven't had too much time. But if I had specific questions on changes, should I direct those to the MFAC entity within CARB or to you guys in written comments?
Hi, Christian. This is Josh Simmons. For questions specific to Appendix D, I would direct them to the Moyer help inbox, which I think we're going to be putting that email address up on screen shortly here. But I would direct them there first, and then if you have specific questions from there, you'll probably likely end up discussing with me. And if we need more information on that, then we can start looking towards our MFAC folks, and I can direct you to the right places.
Okay, and do you know why a lot of the categories appeared to be changed by just 1 year? So now like most of the tables don't line up for comparison purposes? Is that an internal decision or?
Would you be able to clarify your question for me by 1 year, or like the tables aren't lining up compared to the previous version any longer, or?
Yeah, just in like, say for 14K to 33K vehicles, it was 1987 to 1990. And now it's 1986 to 1989. It looks like the 2011, the years were the same. And so it really can't compare or like ask like, why did certain emission factors increase, especially for like really old years?
Yeah, no, okay. I understand your question now. Thank you. Yeah, so the tables that are in Appendix C currently are what was recommended to us by MFAC staff and what is current in their inventory. So the years that you're seeing listed in the tables and the way that they're organized is reflective of that as well. And if you want specifics as far as like the individual values and why they changed, again, I would encourage you to reach out to the Moyer help inbox, and you and I can dive into it, into the weeds. I don't necessarily have the numbers in front of me at this very moment, so.
Thank you, Josh. And then the last hand up that we have is from Lisa McGee. You should be able to unmute yourself, Lisa, and comment or ask your question.
Hi, did I get to unmute on time? I think I did, yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
It's Lisa, Comstock Center. So I have quite a few questions. So I have a comment, so I want to make sure that's getting addressed as we continue to have new lessons learned, especially on the medium heavy duty space, which is fairly nascent on the charging aspects, right? we don't have a lot of sites out there built for medium heavy duty. And, you know, CARB invented the zero emission powertrain certification to kind of help the fleets get the confidence that they needed on the vehicle equipment when the OEM might come and go or not provide the service. And so my goal is that we can outlive the OEMs as necessary for stranded assets that certainly have a useful life well beyond what some of these potential OEMs may be able to withstand in a nascent industry still. So I share this because we're going through our own experiences right now, and I want to make sure that we have an ability to correct and expect some type of service for this equipment. And so, you know, first things I'm going to just run through kind of lots of things. On the interoperability side, we have lots of issues. You know, there's nothing expected of each of these OEMs to do anything with another vehicle OEM to make sure that these communications and handshakes work effectively. So I'd like to make sure that on an approved product list, we've got some expectations that are developed, whether it's 2 OEMs sign off on it or whatever it be. And on the repair side, we're all over the place on repair sides, right? There's really no expectations other than hope that everyone does the duty to keep the equipment running, which supports the vehicles to stay on the road. And when they don't, we're at a crossroads with many issues. And so my hopes is that we've got some expectation with a fault 1, fault 2, or fault 3 on a certain type of repair and response time. A 24/7 phone number to provide services and supports, spare parts and inventory to each of the dealers, diagnostic tools at a specific price point for each of those dealers that are supporting that particular OEM as another vendor. And so, you know, just to, again, to make sure we're not avoiding, we're avoiding stranded assets and also have the ability to provide services and supports. And then the big issue that we have, I don't think it's a regulatory issue from my understanding today, is that we've got a lot of advanced requirements in these processes to prepay 3 years, 5 years for a warranty and maintenance, and 3 or 5 years for network services. And when you don't outlive, when the OEM can't be alive for that long, you know, I think we need to make sure that we're respectfully handling how these outline costs are potentially a big risk that could be corrected by another process, right? It'd be like asking us to pay our cable service for 3 years up front or a phone service for 3 years up front. I just think this needs to be addressed. Then moving on to the microgrid side, I have questions on that. And then I guess on the charger, I do have a question. Are you going to have an approved product list? Do you have any type of certification or standard that you're going to expect with these new types of portable equipment? And then, and same kind maybe even on the microgrid side. So, but I do have questions on the microgrid side. Can you not add I think I understood when I tried to read through some of this stuff real quickly, that the microgrids are not supported as a renewable source, but I'm not clear if that's true with hydrogen. So I'll stop there, and I have a couple more questions on microgrid as well.
I can maybe start off by answering that question. Thank you, McGee, for your feedback. It seems like there was a lot of questions there. It might be helpful if we can speak more offline. So I encourage you to please reach out to our help inbox, and we'll be happy to provide you more information.
Okay, so yeah, I only had 2 questions. One was, do you guys have a charging approved product list as it relates to the portable equipment?
Currently, we do not have such a list available.
Okay.
So at this time, no.
Okay. And then on the microgrid for renewables, is there an opportunity for battery storage or any type of resource to be considered on the renewable side that would effectively reduce peak time, whether it be for charging or whether it be for a hydrogen? I think I saw some stuff in there about the hydrogen. So is there a pathway forward when you are using some type of source other than the grid for hydrogen are
Yes.
charging besides solar and wind?
Yes, so battery storage systems are eligible project types in this area. So as long as the infrastructure project is zero emission, it is going to be an eligible project type.
Perfect. And can that be supported in any existing project that's a proposed project, not yet built, but you would effectively maybe add this project onto a proposed project that's going to be somewhere in the future, and or can you add it to an existing station?
Apologies, Ken,
So
before you
the-
respond, I just want to make note, Lisa, thank you for your questions. I do think this might have to be your last one. We have to move on to our next set of the next presentation. So if you have further questions after this one, if you want to reach out to the Moyer Help email that will be coming up on the screen in just a minute, we'll get back in touch with you. Thanks. Ken, go ahead. You can respond now.
Thank you. So I'll just note that expansion projects are also an eligible project type in Moyer. So expansions would be allowed. And thank you for your questions and comments, Lisa. We look forward to speaking more later. We can answer your questions in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken and Lisa. We have one more hand up, Tyrone Bell. Let me allow you to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question or comment.
Hi, Tyrone Bell from Monterey Bay Air Resources District. Just a point of clarification for myself. I understand the off-road ag will follow farmer guidelines, but would those projects still be considered Moyer projects? And this is maybe a two-part question. And I ask this because I know like with community air protection, sometimes we refer to like Moyer guidelines for certain equipment categories. And so in effect, if there's no funding for farmer in a given year, are we then precluded from doing any ag projects that year if there's no appropriations?
Okay, two-part answer for you, Tyrone. So the
Yes, thank you.
first one is those ag projects that use the former guidelines would still be considered Moyer projects. And then second, if I remember properly, what was your second question?
Well, I guess that kind of eliminates the second question. So I was basically asking if you were going to consider it to be a farmer project in effect, then I was going to ask if there's no funding for farmer in a given year, then we wouldn't be able
Because
to.
it would still use Moyer funds though, Ty. So
Okay.
so that's okay. If there wasn't farmer funding available, you can still fund them with Moyer funds because they're still Moyer projects.
Exactly. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you, Tyrone. No other hands up, just last comment from Tyler Harris. Just wanted to thank the CARB team for working with the air districts in a truly collaborative effort to update the Moyer Farmer Guidelines. I participated in the Chapter 3 and Chapter 7 teams and really appreciate the engagement of CARB and districts to create workable guidelines for this valuable program. And a big thank you to the team. With that, I don't see any other hands or any other questions or anything in the room. So Debbie, I'm going to pass it back to you to continue.
Yeah, so thank you all for your questions and comments on the Moyer program guideline update. If you have any additional information that you want to know about the program, do not hesitate in contacting us. You can contact myself about the guideline update, or you can use also our general email, which is the moyerhelp@arb.ca.gov. This is a new email address just for the Moyer program. Additionally, we encourage you to check out our website. It's listed here on this slide. I'm not going to read the whole thing out because it's really long. And then also, please feel free to subscribe to the Gov Delivery. And so you'll be aware of upcoming workshops or other things that are happening with the Moyer program. So thank you very much. And if you could just please wait a few minutes as we transition to the farmer portion of this program, as many of us will be getting up and moving out to allow them to present. Thank you.
Thank you for being patient during our cast change. I feel like we should have put some music on.
All right, that was seamless. All right, everybody, thanks for sticking around for the Moyer or for the farmer presentation. We're here to discuss updates to the farmer program guidelines. As such, bear with me. I'm going to try to go slow for the translation services. So anyway, as such, I'll be providing some background information on the program, followed by our proposed changes. And then I'll finish up with next steps for both programs. But before we begin, I think we wanted to introduce ourselves. We're a small team. Evan Powers here with the CARB Farmer Program. I'll give it to Aaron.
I'm Erin Uchida. I'm one of the staff on the Farmer Program as well.
And then Nathan Dean, I'm the manager over the Farmer Program. All right, so I'll start out, like I said, with some farmer program background. So for some context, in fiscal year 2017-18, the California State Legislature appropriated $135 million to CARB to reduce ag sector emissions. Subsequently, CARB staff developed the Funding Agricultural Replacement Measures for Emission Reductions Program, or FARMER for short. And the guidelines for FARMER were approved in early 2018. To streamline implementation of FARMER, we modeled the program after the long-standing and successful Carl Moyer program. Only eligibility in FARMER is limited to vehicles and equipment used at agricultural operations. Over the last 6 years, the farmer programs received continued support from the legislature. The programs received $760 million that's been appropriated statewide, providing significant air quality and climate change benefits. At this point, in addition to our original set of guidelines, we also have subsequent memos that contain various modifications to and additional project criteria that have also been added along the way. There's also various new administrative and project modifications that have been requested, both by implementing air districts as well as ag industry representatives. With that, we are working to update the farmer program guidelines to develop a single comprehensive document that accounts for necessary administrative and project category changes to the current guidelines, provides additional flexibilities and otherwise aids in air district implementation of the program. Throughout the process, we've conducted various public meetings to gather feedback, and we've consulted with partnering air districts and ag industry groups, all while coordinating internally with the CARB Carl Moyer program team to ensure consistency between the two programs where it makes sense and to the extent feasible. The updated draft guidelines include revisions from this public process. A couple of the more recent proposed changes based on feedback from our latest round of public work group meetings include scrap provisions for implements, which tie into one of the changes, project category changes we'll be discussing, as well as clarifying remote inspection provisions as well. So as far as the specific changes, first off, we're proposing to update the definition of ag operations that we currently use. Right now, we use the same definition that's used in CARB's in-use off-road diesel regulation. Our proposal is to continue using that definition for diesel to diesel replacement projects while using the definition from the large spark ignition regulation for spark ignited equipment in the program. And then for on-road trucks, the trucks would be required to operate as an ag vehicle as defined in CARB's truck and bus regulation. We're also proposing to remove the 15% minimum NOx reduction requirement. We've seen an increasing number of projects that obtain a significant reactive organic gas or ROG and PM reductions that may not necessarily achieve that 15% minimum requirement currently. We're also proposing to expand our used equipment category for small producers to all areas of the state. This has proven to be a very successful pilot in the San Joaquin Valley, and we see this as an opportunity to provide additional support to small producers statewide. Consistent with health and safety code listed on the slide, we're also proposing to require districts to evaluate all projects, all off-road projects anyway, using a 10-year project life. This change will also help small operations that don't necessarily accrue as many hours on their equipment. It'll help them basically qualify for a more meaningful incentive amount. Also consistent with that health and safety code, we would also allow for projects or proposing to allow for projects to be funded up to any applicable compliance date. And then lastly, we're proposing to differentiate between project life and contract term. And this is more for on the district side, but we would require districts to contract with all off-road projects for a minimum of 3 years. And then a couple changes proposed on timelines. To avoid lengthy project delays, we're proposing to require that a purchase order be made by an applicant within 1 year of contract execution, while allowing the districts to grant extensions as needed. This will help us meet liquidation deadlines associated with the funding, as well as help streamline project implementation at the district level. We're also proposing to extend the deadline for destruction or salvage of the old vehicle or equipment to 90 calendar days for combustion equipment and up to 6 months for zero emission replacement equipment, mainly to allow for some additional flexibility. The 6-month extension for zero emission replacement equipment would also be at the district's discretion. So in the current guidelines, moving on, in the current guidelines, we generally limit the horsepower of the replacement equipment to 25% of that, of the baseline, or 25% increase rather. We've heard from districts that this can be somewhat limiting for applicants since newer equipment tends to be larger in terms of horsepower. Plus for small equipment, a 25% increase doesn't necessarily amount to much. So our proposal is to allow for a 25 horsepower increase or a 35% increase, whichever is greater. So again, additional flexibility for replacement equipment. Similarly for 2-for-1s or multiple for one projects in which there's multiple pieces of baseline equipment scrapped, we're proposing to base that horsepower cap on the largest piece of baseline equipment. Efficiency gains. So we're proposing to incorporate provisions to allow for efficiency gains associated with replacement specialty equipment. What this will do is potentially provide higher incentive amounts for new specialty equipment. Currently, we assume usage is the same for the baseline and the replacement equipment. With this change, we'll be able to account for harvesters that service more rows per pass, for instance, or sprayers that are able to cover a larger area, or any other specialty equipment that has a measurable physical characteristic that enables it to accomplish the same amount of work in a shorter amount of time. This would not only help us claim additional emission reductions that we feel are not currently being accounted for, but it would also ensure applicants wishing to purchase this costly specialty equipment would qualify for, a more appropriate incentive amount in our minds. We're also proposing to allow additional flexibility for projects where the baseline and replacement equipment are different, provided the replacement equipment serves the same function and performs the same work equivalent. For zero emission equipment, we're proposing to allow tractors 20 horsepower and greater to be allowed as a baseline. Currently, the minimum is 25 horsepower. And our thought on this is that smaller tractors generally lend themselves well to being replaced with some of the electric options currently on the market. Also, an opportunity to provide additional flexibility for zero emission equipment and encourage deployment of these technologies. We're also proposing to increase the max incentive cap for zero emission equipment to 85%. Currently, the cap is similar or identical as the combustion equipment, and it's capped at 80%. Again, we see this as an opportunity to help growers overcome the higher costs generally associated with zero emission equipment and further encouraging the deployment of these technologies. So some quantification and cost effectiveness updates. We're proposing several updates related to emission calculations and cost effectiveness requirements, along with including updated diesel emission factors from CARB's off-road emission factor databases. We'll also be updating the diesel load factors to match what's currently being used by CARB's ag and forestry inventories. Since some of these load factors will unfortunately significantly decrease the emission reductions we're achieving from these projects, we're proposing to increase the cost effectiveness thresholds to continue to provide meaningful incentive amounts. So we're making an increase. We're basically increasing the cost effectiveness thresholds to in part account for these reduced emissions or reduced load factors that cause the calculations to produce lower emission reduction numbers. Our proposed cost effectiveness limit for combustion, similar to Moyer, is $60,000 per weighted ton. Currently, it's at $34,000. The proposed cost effectiveness limit for zero emission is $120,000, so twice as much. Currently, that's at $66,000. And with that concludes basically a high-level summary of the changes we're proposing. Happy to answer any question. My personal contact information's on the slide. Feel free to give me a call, come straight to my desk. Otherwise, shoot an email to myself or to our farmer program email. With that, I think we can open it up to questions. And I'll remind folks that similar to the previous session, you may use the Q&A feature on Zoom if you'd like to type it out. Otherwise, if you'd like to chat, go ahead and speak. If you want to provide oral comments, go ahead and use the raise your hand function and you'll be called on accordingly. If you're calling in by phone, please dial #2 and you'll enter the queue. And then lastly, as a reminder, please state your name and affiliation prior to providing your question or comment. And with that, I'll see if we have any raised hands or.
Thank you, Evan. I don't see any questions to raise hands in the room, so I'll go over the ones. We have one question typed up from Shannon Holbrook. Does the farmer funding cover stationary sources, stationary CI engines for irrigation? Does it fund infrastructure for zero emission off-road equipment?
So for station, I'm sorry, I should probably bring up the question. I didn't get the. Yeah, so farmer does cover irrigation pumps and other stationary and portable combustion equipment. So that's a yes. Does it fund infrastructure for zero emission off-road equipment? Some infrastructure is included as an eligible cost in our zero emission off-road equipment. I don't know if you want to expand on that, but chargers, line extensions, that sort of thing is covered under no line extensions. Chargers and other infrastructure directly tied to the equipment is covered as an eligible cost. Any other line extensions, transformers, et cetera, that would be tied to that project can be funded by the district under the Carl Moyer infrastructure category. But it would have to be tied to that particular project.
Hopefully that answers that question. I'm not seeing any more hands raised. I'm giving it another few more seconds, or any other questions that were typed.
I can expand on one as we're waiting for more folks to chime in with questions. There was a question by Tybell in Monterey asking about UTVs, and for the farmer program, we don't define, I don't know if Monterey's funded any, but we don't define UTVs in the farmer program. We just have some basic characteristics that the UTV must maintain. I think it has to have a towing capacity of 500 pounds and have a weight of 700 pounds. So if there's anything that's questionable, as long as it meets those specifications, and it's really up to the district's discretion, as long as it's serving an ag operation, obviously.
Thank you for that, Evan. I'm not seeing any more questions typed or any hands raised, so I'll send it back to you, Evan.
You guys are making it too easy. So, I mean, like I said, we're extremely reachable. Feel free to, give me a call, send us an email. These slides are available, I think, currently on the farmer website, arb.ca.gov/farmer. Really easy. Happy to answer any questions. And with that, I think we can get into next steps. So as Debbie mentioned earlier, today's workshop marks the opening of the formal 45-day comment period for both sets of respective guidelines. Comment period will close promptly 5 p.m. on October 14th. So please submit comments by then if you intend to do so. Comments should be submitted directly to the board docket, and we can post a link to that on the chat. I think it was already provided earlier by the Moyer folks, but there's a screenshot of it on the slide. If you have any additional questions, like I said, feel free to reach out to any of the contacts listed on the slides. You may access either program's email or either program's web pages for materials for today's meeting. And I believe we'll be posting the recording there as well. Correct, Wasim? Yeah. Lastly, just wanted to say thanks to all the folks that took their time to listen into this today, specifically all the hard work that the districts have put into this. I know this has been a huge effort on your part as well. Really appreciate it. I'll go ahead and ask if there's any remaining questions or comments, and then we can adjourn the meeting. Is there anything else?
Christian, Beischer did have his hand up. So Christian, you are allowed to unmute yourself and talk. Go ahead.
Yeah, just so I heard you right, written comments will just go straight to the cardboard docket without response from any staff, either Moyer program or farmer, correct?
If you have clarification questions, please reach out to the actual programs. But I think at this point, all formal comments have to be handled through the formal docket process. I don't know if Michelle wants to expand on that.
I was just going to add to it that if you're looking for specific changes to policy in the documents, those would definitely need to be submitted to the docket, and then there would most likely be follow-up conversations with you on that. Again, if you're just looking for clarification on some things or had a couple of questions that you needed answered, that's certainly just reaching out to the staff, either through the Moyer contact information or the farmer contact information. I hope that clarifies what we're looking for on the docket versus what you guys would bring to just us.
Thank you for that. And then Adam Shapiro did also have a comment. He's echoing Tyler's comments earlier. Thank you to CARB for working collaboratively with the air districts and all the hard work that has gone into these updates. And then Tyler also had another big thank you to the farmer team on a great and collaborative process. And Luis Diaz is asking, is there currently funding secured for farmer program in 2025?
Yeah, appreciate the comments from Adam and Tyler. Luis, so currently, I don't know if we're at liberty to say, but there may be a small amount.
Yes, so there's currently a budget bill out there that is proposing a $2 million investment in the farmer program. That bill still needs to move through the legislature for approval and across the governor's desk as well. So that is currently what is on the table.
But I will add, I don't know if Luis is with the district or if he's an equipment owner, but a lot of the districts, if not most of the districts, do still have significant funding available. So even though we may not receive a lot of funding or any funding this year, please contact your local district because they may still have funding, likely will have funding available. So just because we don't receive funding in the program this year doesn't mean the program shuts down. So I hope that helps.
With that, I'm not seeing any hands raised or any other comments or questions.
Okay, well, again, thank you all and have a good rest of your day. I think we can adjourn the meeting. Thank you.